All right, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Now that we've worked our way through rookie mini camps, we're starting to listen to what the coaching staff is saying and doing when it comes to some of these rookies. And the coaching staff is clearly, based on the commentary, and you can read between the lines, believe there's one rookie in particular. They're envisioning a massive role very early on. We'll get into this latest report out of Green Bay in just 1 second. But first, I'm Nick, that is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, the Green Bay Packers have had a pretty solid offseason up to this point. Of course, it wasn't as much of a big name deals as it was last offseason, all the changes and all the great additions they made, like Jacobs and McKinney and things like that. But it's still been, relatively speaking, a good offseason for the Pack as they look to overcome the hurdles and try and become a championship team once again. They had an overall pretty good draft, but there's one pick in particular, if you listen to what the Packers coaches are saying, that they believe can be a versatile special playmaker for this team. Let's get into the report, and then we'll break down the data on the other side. This is courtesy of Packers Wire. Defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley is always good for a strong quote or two, and he provided some context on the expected roles of several of his defensive players. On Colin Oliver, the Packers' fifth-round pick, who, as an unusually undersized edge player for Green Bay, has been dubbed more of a designated pass rusher or DPR, right? Oliver was a guy, he's only about 240 pounds. He's a great athlete, but a lot of people said he's going to be a third down edge guy only. That's what his role is. That's why he slid to the fifth round. Plus, he had an injury. So a lot of people are like, he doesn't have a lot of roles on a team. He's great as a pass rusher, and we'll get to the data in just 1 second, but that's all he can do. But here's what Hafley says. I don't see him as a designated pass rusher and a special teamer. I see him as a guy who has a skill set to play linebacker and to rush off the edge. So I think he can do both. So again, Jeff Hafley sees him in person, rookie mini camps, after evaluating him through the draft process. Is like, this guy isn't just an edge rusher. This is a guy who can play linebacker for us. He can do a lot of things. He can be just a Swiss Army knife for our defense. And if you look at all of our statistics at the collegiate ranks, you have reason to believe Hafley's right. Let's go ahead and pull up his charts courtesy of College Football Reference. And you can see very early on in his career, his freshman and sophomore season, he's just a strictly defensive end only. Freshman year just blew off the page, 11 and a half sacks. Second year at 5 sacks. His team tried to orient to try and stop him more. Again, he was more of strictly an edge rusher, but then he gets moved to more of a traditional linebacking role. And you can see what happens. His tackles just blow off the page. His sack numbers drop dramatically. So instead of being just an edge rusher, he becomes more of a traditional linebacker. So his tackles for loss, though, he starts getting them more as a stand-up linebacker with blowing up screens, stopping the run, and while still getting a decent amount of sacks. His senior year was hurt, so his numbers are really low there. He only played 2 games, although he was really effective in those 2 games. But it's very, very clear that this is a kid here in Oliver who has the experience and the playmaking ability. He can line up as an edge and get 12, 11 and a half sacks and 16 tackles for loss. He can then line up as a linebacker, get 16 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 5 passes defended, and 4 forced fumbles. He can do it all. He's a playmaker wherever you put him on the football field. And I think that's what Jeff Hafley is saying. This is a guy who's not just going to be a third or nine pass rusher off the edge. He's a guy that can come in and we can line him up wherever. He's just a playmaker, a versatile tool that we can use in whatever situation to help out our defense. And these are the kind of guys that can be very underrated, but can be special disruptors for any team, because the guys that can line up outside your offensive tackle one play on 3rd and 8 and then be a stand-up linebacker across the center the next play, cover a running back out of the backfield the next play, and then be lined up as an edge rusher and run a stunt the next play after that. That's really hard for an offense to account for. It's really hard to say, okay, we want to attack this player. How do you attack a player where you don't know what he's going to do? It's hard for teams to game plan for. It's even harder for them to stop. It's very clear the Packers are high in Colin Oliver for his versatility. But when you talk about his versatility, that's important. But this guy is still just one heck of a pass rusher. If we look at his data here, let's pull up the chart. If you look at his pass rush grade, Oliver versus the Green Bay Packers as a team in 2024, you can see Oliver. We looked at his 2023 numbers because that was his last full season. His 2024 numbers were off the chart as a grade, but that was only 2 games because he got hurt, so we're not going to use those numbers. Green Bay was, about 67, 68 mil of the pack in terms of pass rush grade. Colin Oliver was about 81. So significantly better pass rush grade than the Green Bay Packers average as a team in 2024. So he's going to come in and just right off the gate be a pass rushing boost to this team And Hafley also views him as a guy who can be used all over the field for a bunch of different reasons. A playmaker, again, led the conference in forced fumbles 2023 as well, while tripling his tackling number while moving to linebacker. I'm sorry, he led the conference in forced fumbles in 2023. He didn't play in 2020, or he was hurt in 2024. So he's a guy here in Colin Oliver who can be a playmaker wherever you put him on the field. He's exactly, I think, what the Packers have been looking for as they transition to this Hafley defense. They've got Edgerrin Cooper, who fits a very similar role. But Cooper, to me, is more of a linebacker that can rush the passer and that kind of versatility, which is important. But I look at a guy in Oliver here where he's a pass rusher that can line up at linebacker. And with Cooper and Oliver and the rest of these guys, you now have a positionless front seven where offensive lines and quarterbacks, they don't know what's going on. You could have you can have four linebackers on the field in a defensive personnel package, and two guys could end up being basically pass rushers, and you're in a nickel defense, and opposing offenses will think you're kind of in a goal line look with four linebackers. There's a lot of versatility. There's a lot of optionality in this Packers defense, and it's going to make them very tough to handle as we get in the regular season, especially if and I think the Green Bay Packers coaching staff really believes this. This is what they're saying. Colin Oliver can return from his injury and be an impact player early on. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Green Bay fans, in the comment section below, of all the rookies the Packers have added, whether through the draft or undrafted free agents, who's the one guy you're expecting to have kind of an immediate impact for this team that no one is talking about, right? Everyone's looking at the wide receiver position, say, hey, yeah, this is going to be a big impact. But give us another guy that's kind of sliding under the radar. Maybe it's Oliver, maybe it's somebody else. Let us know who that is in the comment section below. But Miles, over to you now. What are your thoughts on this latest news out of Green Bay?
Yeah, Nick, I think one thing you brought up that's really important is the comp of Edgerrin Cooper and a guy like Oliver, and like how they're the same but also a little bit different. If you look at statistically what these guys do as well, I think it's, helps your point out a lot here. You look at what Edgerrin Cooper did last year for Green Bay. He lined up in the box or in the linebacker position 434 times, but he also lined up on the defensive line 50 times. So he's a guy that is a box, like in the box standard style of linebacker who can every so often line up on the edge and be an effective player. We look at Colin Oliver, though, the last few years. This is a guy who, and if we say 2024, their stats aren't really important, but you go to 2023, he lined up outside the tackle or on the defensive line as an edge 435 times. He lined up in off-ball linebacker type of style of position 480 times. So this is a guy who did both. He really started his career 399 times on the edge versus 61 times in that off-ball linebacker position. Morph more to like a 50-50 split. We don't know what it would have been in 2024. I imagine be going more towards that style of being very versatile, but still have a guy that, okay, one play we can like Cooper up on the edge. We can drop Oliver back to, be a linebacker. It's very interesting. Versus the next play, we can have Oliver on the edge, Cooper as a linebacker. You never know where the guys are going to go. This reminds me of the ability to have either a running back. We've seen this a lot lately. Running backs that are wide receivers, or tight ends that are wide receivers, like players, guys that come on the field and you truly don't know how to account for them. You don't know what they're going to do each play. I think that is really, really important. We've seen a lot of safeties that can maybe move down, play linebacker. There's this positionless player I think is really important. And you talk about impact. I think guys like this, guys like Oliver, these are going to have really big impacts on the defensive side of the ball. Because when the offense comes out onto the field and they're trying to game plan for what's going to happen, you can't. You have these guys, they can do everything. They can move around the defense. They can flow. Like if something's not working somewhere, you can easily flip them over to a different position and they're gaining more traction there. I think this is a really smart style of drafting, a really great way to do it. And I think when you look at a guy like Colin Oliver, what he brings to the Green Bay defense, this was a steal. This is a guy that's going to be very impactful. He probably slid because of the injuries in 2024, but as you alluded to, and you look at his stats, he was off to an incredible start in 2024 in the two games he did play anyway. So I think the trend was still going for him. I don't think it was a fluke that he had a really great 2023 season, being able to switch positions. So this is a great move for Green Bay. I think it's going to help him out a lot. And this positionless player, let's keep an eye on that this season because I think we're going to see it be affecting offenses a lot with this Green Bay defense.
You bring up a great point. When a lot of people think positionless players on defense, right? The positionless player on offense, that's a trend that's been going on for the better part of a decade. And defenses have been trying to adjust. But normally what it's been a safety that can line up everywhere, a defensive back. He can be a deep field, deep third. He can be a cover two safety. He can be an in the box linebacker. He can be a nickel linebacker. Maybe he can line up as a slot corner, right? Maybe he can blitz off the edge. It's usually been like a safety as that kind of positionless player. But what the Packers are doing here are taking it basically to a box role. They're saying, hey, we've got an edge rusher here who can play stand-up linebacker. And I think that gives them a lot of optionality to attack opposing offenses. Because one of the things that offenses rely on, especially during the game plan phase, is understanding how defenses are going to attack and then adjusting it for it. For example, if a team's got a great pass rusher, if you got like a Micah Parsons or something like that, they're gonna be like, okay, we're gonna, and he lines up on the left side 50% of the time or 70, whatever it is. So, okay, we're going to double Mike Parsons. We're going to slide our protection to Micah Parsons. We're just going to do that. He normally lines up here, but if he lines up over here, that's what we're going to do, right? And that's how teams game plan and prepare, right? It's logical stuff. But if you've got a team and you're preparing for the Packers and you don't know what you're going to face, you don't know if Cooper's going to be blitzing off the edge, 30 snaps that game. You don't know if you've got Colin Oliver, who's going to be an edge rusher going after your blind side every other play, or if he's going to be a stand-up linebacker stopping the run. How do you prepare? How do you get your offensive line or your quarterback and your running backs and tight ends, get your protection schemes in sync and come up with a good strategy? Because you don't know what's going to happen, right? You're going to have to react to how the Packers decide to attack you in game, which is going to put you behind the 8 ball at least one possession. And it doesn't sound like a huge thing, but again, imagine if every single game the opposition to Green Bay had one dead offensive possession just because they're trying to see what the Packers are going to do. That's an incredible advantage for Green Bay. It basically is essentially worth almost a free punt, right? And when it comes to these close games, these playoff games and big games, that's the difference between winning and losing. I think a lot of these games, one stop. How often do we see that? Oh, if they just got one more stop, they would have won, or one more stop, they would have had a chance to win. This is essentially what Green Bay is setting up, just an early drive that ends in a stop for the opposition as they try and figure out how the Packers are going to attack them defensively, just because they have so much optionality with the great amount of playmakers, plus a lot of these key veterans. And this is also one of the reasons why they brought in Hafley, right? A guy who spent some time in college, who has a more creative, different approach, a little unique. The Packers got a little too cookie cutter there, a little basic in their strategy for a couple of years. They're back to being incredibly aggressive. It's not like strategically like Dom Capers going back a long time with his aggressive blitzing, that 3-4 style, but from just a mindset perspective, being aggressive, dictating to the offense, right? Trying to create havoc and disrupting. It's that kind of mindset is returning to Green Bay, which I think Packers fans will really appreciate. So I think when you look at Colin Oliver specifically as a prospect, a lot of people said, yeah, he's a little undersized, for an edge rusher. Yeah, the injury is a concern. We don't know how, we don't really know where he fits. And that's why he slides to the 5th round, those kind of things. But if you look at just where the Packers are going to use him, and that's really important. I remember reading a book about the New England Patriots, and when they were in the heyday of their dynasty, their front office, they would say, listen, there's a guy that may be a 5th round grade who would be a 5th round grade for 31 other teams. But for us, the way we want to use him, he's like a 1st round player. So we may pick him in the 2nd or 3rd round, right? And for us, he'll be a star because we have a specific role in mind. So even though he may be viewed as a certain grade, for us, he's much higher because we got a specific role. I think that's what the Packers have denoted here when it comes to Oliver. Obviously, the concerns, his size, and things like that made him fall to day 3 in the draft. But it's clear Green Bay has a specific role in mind. And even though he was a 5th round draft pick, I think his production and his value for Green Bay will be much, much more.